What's up, Coach Bach here. Going to do a quick rundown on how creatine functions in our cells and talk about why you might want to consider taking creatine as a supplement. All right, so we got to start with some biochemistry here. So first of all, ATP, adenosine triphosphate, this is your body's energy molecule. So what that means is you burn ATP to fuel all our cellular processes, okay? Now, what burning means is actually just you release one of the phosphate molecules from the ATP molecule, okay? So that means there's a release of energy because there's energy stored in that chemical bond. So you're not burning the molecule in the sense like the molecule disappears. You're just taking off one of the phosphates and there's a release of energy there. So one such cellular process that requires this is muscle contraction. Okay, so let's say we're in a muscle cell here. We got our myosin and actin lined up in the sarcomere, right? They're overlapping protein filaments. You have a cross bridge form. That's what drives all our muscle tension. And then you actually need an ATP molecule to break the cross bridge. Okay, so in order to relax the muscle actually, or in order to continue cycling the cross bridges, you need the ATP. So what happens is there's a release of phosphate. You get the energy at this site to break that cross bridge. So now the ATP has become ADP, adenosine diphosphate. It only has 2 phosphate molecules now. Now it has to become ATP again in order to be used again. So you got to add a phosphate molecule back to your ADP in order to use it. And this is where we have what are called energy systems. These are different chemical processes that occur in our cells in order to rephosphorylate ADP and make it ATP again. So there's a number of those energy systems, but the one we're going to talk about right now is the phosphocreatine energy system. All right. This is the fastest, and therefore you could describe it as like the most powerful energy system. So it's real simple. You have creatine with a phosphate bound to it, okay, thus phosphocreatine. And then the creatine just donates this phosphate to the ADP, and that makes it ATP again. Okay, it's a very simple process. That's why it's fast. That's why it is used for situations where energy is required very quickly, such as when we're doing maximal effort physical activity. To give you an idea, the phosphocreatine supply in a cell might get burned through within like 6 to 10 seconds of maximal effort exercise. All right, so that's how fast it can get used up. However, the creatine can also then be rephosphorylated. You can add a phosphate back to creatine. This is done by an enzyme called creatine kinase. You just because you burn through the PCR system in like, let's say, a maximal effort sprint or something, doesn't mean it's just gone for the rest of your workout. It can be regenerated so that it's available again for the next sprint, okay? So that's a simple look at how creatine functions in the cell as an energy system, okay? Now, what are the effects of having more creatine in your cells? Well, sort of the immediate direct effect is you have more fast energy. So that could provide you with superior fuel for maximal effort exercise in particular. But then also, because you have more of that superior fast fuel source, you also reduce the requirement for other energy systems. And so then you get a decrease in the chemical stress on your cells from having to run those other energy systems as hard. And so then this actually has a beneficial effect on recovery. The same workout is not as taxing on your muscle cells if you have more creatine available. Because of these effects, there are numerous examples of research in which a group of subjects that supplements with creatine will see greater increases in strength and power across a training program. Here's an example where the creatine supplement group saw greater increases in elbow flexion strength compared to a placebo group. Here's an example of a study that shows the decrease in chemical stress from a really hard workout. Now, what about negative side effects? This is, of course, a question you should ask when it comes to supplements. The safety of creatine has been demonstrated by hundreds of studies. You will, of course, if you check comment sections, find people sharing their personal experience of bloating or digestive discomfort, something like that. And not to say that some of those cases can't exist, but this study here did a meta-analysis on negative effects and found that the rate of negative side effects in creatine supplementation matched that of placebo. Most likely, people are experiencing negative effects at random and then attributing it to creatine, or they're going in with some type of expectation or concern about negative effects and then finding a way to confirm that expectation. Now, I, of course, will suggest that you get creatine from Legion. This is third-party tested, so you can have confidence in the safety that it's not contaminated. And you can use code JUMPSCIENCE to get a discount on that.